Welcome back from your breakout rooms, everyone who has now returned to this primary webinar room. We'll wait just a few minutes. As we've all learned during these COVID times, it often takes people a few minutes to trickle back into the central meeting room, this virtual space that we are in. We certainly hope that you enjoyed your breakout sessions. I dipped into several of them during this time and got to enjoy some both informative and I think in some parts provocative and at other places productive discussion about the way regeneration can be embedded into investment practice and embedded into finance more broadly. Interestingly, in the humankind session, I was in for a couple of moments. The theme was really about how to weave stakeholder perspectives across the entire horizon of an investment, and heard from one panelist describing his sort of private equity impact investing work that was leading to employee ownership models as being one way to embed those regenerative principles into the work. In the land breakout session, for anybody who was in the land session, I'm not quite sure if it's ended yet or not, but compelling information from a panelist based in India there about sort of the three factors that he uses in order to bring awareness and bring regenerative principles into all of his work. And he cited three primary elements that would embed that effectively. He cited collaboration across sectors, obvious enough. And then he said finding champions and leveraging technology. He listed those three ways as sort of primary levers that he and his team use in terms of embedding regenerative principles into their work and into what they're doing. I also want to say for many of you who may be following along with the GIIN on social media, we thank those of you who have taken part in the social media discussion that is really taking this regeneration theme beyond the virtual walls of our convening today. It is exciting to see a dynamic discussion unfolding in that space as well. For folks who may not yet be taking part in that, you'll want to search the hashtag #NextNormalNow. So the hashtag is actually the very same as this event, and that is the thread that will connect this discussion on social media. So we encourage anyone who has not done that yet to take part in the social media discussion as well. And the whole idea is to expand this vision of regeneration and regenerative principles and how they can be applied to decision-making and investing beyond the virtual walls of our convening today. And so by tagging additional people, we're hoping to expand the conversation and help these principles take hold. I think we have reached critical mass back here in the primary Zoom room now. So with that, I am delighted to move ahead. We hope you enjoyed those breakout sessions. For the people who have just arrived back here in the primary webinar room, I'm pleased to say that there is still very much more to come on our agenda today, including a session about practical applications from the field, focused on the unforgettable work of two regenerative innovators. Additionally, we have a powerful special message from a world-famous South African leader, specifically for our Next Normal Now audience. Before we get to all of that, I am very pleased to introduce today's next fireside chat. We are excited to welcome Konda Mason as a fresh and compelling voice in our Next Normal Now community. Her work is blazing trails in regenerative agriculture, economic equity, and racial justice. So for now, I am happy to return the virtual stage to our CEO, Amit.
Thank you, George. A primary theme of the regeneration conversation is about forging a deeper relationship with each other and our planet. When it comes to investment, a regenerative approach pushes us to implement practices that integrate sustainability, justice, and equity into all decisions, including in agriculture. Some of you have already been part of this unfolding conversation if you attended our breakout session on land. To bring these ideas to the forefront of our conversation today, I'm delighted to introduce a leader who truly represents what it means to be regenerative, not only in business, but in life. Konda Mason is a champion of the movement to bring regenerative practices, cooperative ownership, non-extractive capital, and economic equity to African American farmers throughout the United States. Konda is the president and founder of Jubilee Justice, a nonprofit focused on transitioning farmers to regenerative agricultural techniques and sustainably sourced food. Konda is also a co-founder of Potlicker Capital, which is the supporting charitable loan fund that finances Jubilee's push for racial equity and regenerative farming. Konda, welcome to Next Normal Now.
Okay, I guess I have to unmute. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Well, Konda, you have such a fascinating personal history. You've previously worked in the entertainment industry, but then you decided to turn your attention to sustainability and regeneration. Can you talk about what inspired you to shift gears?
It sounds like a shift in gears, but it felt pretty seamless to me. It's pretty much the same. I would say that I come from a family, first of all, that was very much promoted activism and taking care of those who are most marginalized and working for justice. And so when I was in the entertainment business, most of the time I was there, I was working with jazz musicians, and they're pretty much like farmers if you think about it. They are, they're firstly mostly Black and men and women who work really hard on the edge of society. Everyone depends upon them to supply them with, I would say, soul food, whether you're jazz or whether it's food. And yet they're also the people who get paid the least, who are marginalized economically. And so I worked with jazz musicians a lot. And then the other folks that I work with in the entertainment business, I was always working with something that had a meaning, that had a message to say. I think art is a really incredibly important aspect of teaching us how to live on the planet. And so all of the art that I worked with, whether it was in theater or film or music, it was always with those people who had a important message to say. So it's pretty much the same thing. It's the same thread through all of it.
I totally see that. And before you started Jubilee Justice, you were primarily focused on initiatives related to energy, access to quality food, and social entrepreneurship. One of your highlights included bringing the first organic produce section in a major grocery store to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Your work now is focused on farming practices in rural America. Can you tell us about Jubilee Justice and how your work intersects with the topic of regeneration in agriculture and beyond?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the work that I'm doing right now, I started a nonprofit, my first nonprofit, called Jubilee Justice. And we're working at the intersection. First of all, it started with something called the Journeys, the Jubilee Justice Journeys, working at the intersection in conversations about land, race, money, and spirit. So that's the intersection. And for me, when I think about land, race, and money, it is the core issues that haunt America. It's the core issues that we sometimes, part of it, we put under the table. We don't like to talk about, particularly across race and across class, and to have these real conversations. And so it started out like that. And talking across race, cross class, with about land, about race, and about money, literally on a plantation in Louisiana, having those conversations, not in a boardroom in Oakland or San Francisco, but on a plantation in Louisiana, and making it real, and us really coming together. And spirit being that place that ties us all together, where we are all, where we all yearn to, I believe, to tap into. And it's that place where we're deeply interconnected and intertwined. And so the conversations are not so much, they're up here, yes, but then we would, drop down to the heart and say, how do we get out of this boat together? And so it began there. And then I started the Black Farmers Rice Project out of that. And again, that is a project where we work with Black farmers throughout the Southeast, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Georgia. And we're addressing this horrible, horrible gap and discrimination that has happened in rural America. I always think, Amit, I always think about how the murder of George Floyd, of Mr. Floyd, kind of woke up America and the world in a way that, oh, this is real. This is really what Black people have to live through in America. And we had the benefit of having cell phones document what happened. In rural America, there's no cell phones documenting the discrimination. And the discrimination is so severe. The racial discrimination is so severe. Going from having over 20 million acres aggregate Black farmers had in the 1920s, even after in Jim Crow and all of that, still managed to aggregate 20 million acres. Black farmers are down to less than 2 million acres now. There used to be over 1 million farmers. Now they're down to 45,000 farmers, losing 30,000 acres per year. That is an intentional collusion, I would say, between the US government, the USDA, and private business, and it is working. And so what we're doing is working to try to just close that gap and have these people hold on to their land and be viable partners in society, and also be food secure, and to bring food security to the communities. And so we work with them with a rice. We have actually bringing a sustainable way of growing rice. Rice is like the third largest commodity on the planet. And rice is also brought here in the United States, was brought here through the capture of Africans from West Africa. They were brought to South Carolina to grow rice like they saw, like the Europeans saw them doing in West Africa. So they brought them. South Carolina was the home of rice, and it was it's like the African diasporic basic diet is rice. And so they were here in treacherous conditions growing rice with snakes and alligators in the swamps of South Carolina. And after emancipation, they left, of course, and walked away from growing rice. So we're bringing it back. We're bringing rice back, and we're bringing it back to Black farmers in a way where they this time participate in the upside, where they're in a cooperative. We bought a rice mill, and they will own the rice mill. So it would be the first time where they will actually benefit. And this rice, the way it's grown, is called the system of rice intensification. Rice is a huge contributor. Who knew? I didn't know. To greenhouse gases, to methane, which is the worst. All the water in rice, right? When you think of rice, you think of rice paddies, you think of a lot of water. All of that water, first of all, water use. Secondly, there's billions and gazillions of microbes in the water that are off-gassing methane. And so this way of growing rice, there's not the rice paddies, it's not rice paddies, it's grown like a crop is. And so we eliminate the water use, which California desperately needs, and it's a big rice producer. And we eliminate the methane gas, which is huge contributor in regular rice growing in the world. And so we brought this incredibly sustainable way of growing rice in a collaboration with some great partners. We're working with the technical assistance is coming from Cornell University, and the market is with a wonderful company called Lotus Foods. And the Black farmers are learning how to do this. It's the first time in this country that this kind of technical assistance around SRI rice is happening, and it's happening with Black farmers being in the front of the line this time instead of in the back. So I'm super excited about what we're doing, and we're doing it in a regenerative way because, of course, you can't just grow one crop. So we're looking at what are the rotation crops, doing all of in between, having the cover crops, and really working towards improving soil so that we can actually sequester carbon as well. So it's an integrated, a holistic system that these farmers are doing, and that's what Jubilee Justice is about.
Well, it's an incredibly powerful example, and certainly that historical context I think is so important as to bring into this conversation.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is so important to the way we design this event is to really talk about like glimmers of the future that are here in the present, the next normal now. Now, one of the things that you also talk about, and I'll quote you on this, is that debt should be on society's balance sheet, not only on the farmer.
That's right.
Can you talk about what the future of capital, like debt and equity investing, can look like for the people that you work with? Like, how would you like that to take shape as we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, so you know, in order to go forward, I always feel like you have to go back. You have to look at the harm and how the harm happened. And we have a society that likes to just move forward and not think about what happened, and not really. So repair needs to happen, and we have to look at how it happened. And Black farmers specifically have been way over collateralized over their white counterparts. The loans that they get from USDA, if they ever got them, were late. Wait until the season is almost, or I think it's too late to plant. And then they give them part of what they asked for. So then they're scrambling to put seeds in the ground. What we're doing is creating a new institution. I mean, I really, me and my partner, Mark Watson, who is the person who's really, he's the president of Pot Liquor Capital, which, as you noted, is a fund that he is directing. And you know, one of the things that I love about certain people on the planet who came before me, and Buckminster Fuller is one of them. You know, he always said to change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And so I do believe that the systems that are here, the financial systems that we have that are degrading the world, the planet, and the people, we have to create something new and different. And so I feel like we're creating a parallel little universe over here with Pot Liquor Capital. It is a nonprofit. It is, we are approaching capital from the place of a integrated capital model. That means that we have grants, we have recoverable grants, and we have loans, very low interest, from 0 to 3% loans. This is the kind of repair when you have been back so far and pushed so far intentionally. You can't expect, and non-collateralized, you cannot expect to have the same kind of requirements for people who have been so maligned financially and economic apartheid, and then expecting to have the same kinds of rules and regulations and requirements and policies. You can't do it, or you continue to create the status quo. And so what we're doing is changing that up. We work with the farmers very closely. We know our farmers, and we get the story is very similar across the board, no matter whether they're in Georgia or Mississippi. And what we're doing is trying to repair the harm that has happened by getting into their stories, bringing in the kind of capital that they need at the time, and not strapping them again with debt that is going to be onerous and trap them as they have been trapped. We are looking at taking out their loans, refinancing loans, doing all the kinds of things that we can to help get them out of the situation, repair it, and then help them move forward.
Thank you for sharing that, and you know, the kind of capital strategy around the work that you do. Can you talk, look at the other kind of perspective as well, and talk a little bit about what this looks like for the farmers who are receiving this very this kind of support and financing that's very intentionally designed to not be extractive, both from a financial relationship, but also helping them to transition their farms to be more regenerative, through the Black Rice Project and other things that you're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting because the truth of the matter is that these farmers are so on the edge. They could get, they have been holding on for generations, and they're still very much on the edge. I mean, the average Black farm is about 100 acres when it takes 500 acres to be viable. Okay. And so we are working with them in a way where we sit with them, we learn, like I said, what they need, and bringing this capital and bringing a supportive system around, first of all, that we care. We start with the fact that we don't bring anything other than we meet them and we listen to them and we sit with them and we create relationship. It all begins with relationship building. The trust is so low because everybody has come in, has hurt them. Even everybody, there have been Black and brown people who have come in to hurt them. And so we sit with them and we develop a modicum of trust at the beginning before we do anything. If we find that they're interested, we let them know that we have some tools that may be helpful. We don't know. We come in very humbly and we find out what is their needs, and they find out who we are, and then we come back again, and then we come back again. And as you keep coming back, they realize, oh, these people are serious. They really are here. They didn't just come once to see and to be extractive. So our thing is absolutely about regeneration. The world, this country and the world has to move into a regenerative way of doing everything, everything, everything. And a lot of people think of regeneration around, at least in my field, they think about it as regenerative agriculture. That is only one aspect of it. Regeneration, I love Paul Hawken, who has written a book that, if you people don't know, is called Regeneration. It just came out. It is on the shelves now, and it is brilliant. And I love his definition of regeneration. And he talks about regeneration is when you put life at the center of every decision that you make and of every action that you take. You know what promotes life and you know what doesn't promote life. And so if you put life at the center of everything you do, promoting life, that is regenerative. That means whether it's the social, within the social context that we have, or the agriculture ecological context, they are interlinked. This whole bifurcation of social justice over here and ecological justice over here is a false dichotomy. It's all interlinked. And so when you can't very well revive the planet and keep stepping on people, we have to change that. It is core to saving this planet. And, you know, with our code red alert with the IPCC came out with this year around climate, we are really in a bad way. And it's not just about climate. Climate has to be, we have to see it as a bigger picture. People are at the center of it, and how we treat each other reflects how we treat the planet. And if we don't get to the core of changing how we treat each other and bringing equity into the center, we are not going to have a planet that survives this catastrophe that we've created. And so it's really important to us at Pot Liquor Capital and Jubilee Justice that we see the whole picture. We're dealing with the people, with the society, with those most marginalized, those who have been left out. We deal with that situation economically, spiritually. We remind them that this whole word regeneration, what is it really? It's the same practices that their foreparents had years ago. It's what they already know in their DNA that now has been put together and called regeneration. Great, I love it. And it's not new, it's old. And what we do is we remind them, we talk to them about, when we go in and we talk about, how long have you had this land? What about your parents and your grandparents? What kind of farming did they do? They didn't have all these chemicals. This dependency on chemicals that they currently have, most of them, they're stuck. They're stuck. And they know they're stuck and they would love to get out of it. And what we do is we try just little ways to try to pull them out of this stuckness. Let's do a small plot, a third of an acre, you know, or half of that even. And let's no chemicals. We're going to do it completely differently. And we do it as an experiment. And they see that maybe this can work. We get rid of all those the big equipment that is completely compacting the earth and creating the kind of soil that's dead that we have now in agriculture. And so we show them different ways, and they show us. This is not a one-way street. Believe me, we are not coming in with a lot of wisdom. We are taking and listening to their wisdom, to their foreparents' wisdom. And together we go, what if we went back there? What would that be like? And so that's what's happening. And it's really beautiful to see the relationships that we are creating. I love these farmers. And they bring so much joy to me and to our team. And they are, they want to get out of this stuck agrochemical business that they are in. And so we're just opening up a door of a way out.
Well, I think that is such a a powerful set of perspectives to close on. I think I really appreciate this conversation because I think you've not only grounded this in kind of land and people and the interrelationship between the two, but also brought this out of to the higher level of like what we're ultimately trying to accomplish with the way we design our society. I think these points around putting equity at the center, putting life at the center, and organizing around that, certainly, from your perspective, you're doing this in practice. And I think what's so important about your work is that it shows the ripple effects generations have not only on our food systems, but also in how we allocate our capital and how regeneration is absolutely critical to shifting the system.
Yeah.
One of the things that really resonates with me is that as we look to the future, this importance of reckoning with our past, and that a lot of these the new approaches around regeneration are actually approaches that have been around for centuries, and we're actually just reintroducing them in a way that restores a harmony that we've lost. So I do want to thank you so much for joining us today, and your work is helping us all see the future of our next normal.
Well, great. I really appreciate being here. And I just want to say that this word regeneration, I love it. And it's being greenwashed already where everybody's using the word regeneration. We, time is ticking, everyone. And we've got to go deeper than we've ever been. We've got to let go of some things. We've got to change internally in order to change externally. And that's what the work that the other part of my work, the Jubilee Justice Journeys, we work with the internal, the mindset that creates the system of injustice and creates the system of degrading the planet. And so I just hope that this is not just a topical conversation. You know, I fear that when I have these conversations and I love being here and it's 20 minutes, right? And it's like, there's so much to say and so much to do. I'm praying that people take this seriously and that we all participate. Every single being that's listening to this, please act, do something. There's so much to do. And again, I want to point to the book Regeneration. In the back of it, he has a list of things to do. Everybody asks what to do. What should I do? The one thing that I want to leave with is get proximate. Come closer. We keep ourselves distance from issues. We know them in here, but we don't want to come closer. And the closer you come, the more your heart opens and the more you're likely to do. So get proximate, people. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Those powerful words to end on, and I'm so grateful for you joining us. And I do hope that everyone listening to this, responds to that call to action. The urgency is it couldn't be overstated. And so thank you so much, Konda, for your leadership and for taking the time during harvest season to join us as part of this conversation.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate being here. Take care.
Wow. Get proximate. Get proximate. What a memorable call to action there. Konda, thank you so much. Konda really offers a rare combination of both inspiration, as you all felt, and also that practical insight about embedding and applying regenerative principles. She really demonstrates the way that those principles can infuse an entire approach, or as John Elkington said with us just a bit earlier today, a state of mind, that regenerative state of mind. So I know that Konda's perspective has inspired many of us, myself included, and we also know that inspiration comes in many forms. And so I am excited now to enjoy a bit of a change of pace and welcome South African visionary Kumi Naidoo. Kumi is a lifelong campaigner for human rights, social justice, and the environment. All of those, of course, issues that deeply intersect with our global economic system. He is joining us to give a special message specifically for this Next Normal Now community. So please be prepared to be inspired again. Here's Kumi.
Today, I wanted to share with you a poem I wrote during lockdown. that essentially calls for a new social contract. We are all desperate to get back to normal, but should we? Normal. What an average word. So uninspired, it's actually absurd. In a time when we have been forced to change our ways, to pause and isolate and dream of better days, that we'd ever yearn for the world of yesteryear, a world so divided, so fragmented by fear, it's mind-boggling at best that we might just blow Mother Nature's test, longing for the same madness that put us in this global sadness. Of me first and screw you and buy four for the price of two. Surely, getting back to normal can't be our aim after all the sacrifices, death and pain. Yes, this pandemic has brought us to our knees, cutting jobs and highlighting inequality. Our leaders are exposed, and the broken systems they have imposed are now obviously not making any sense. So why do we obsess and resist what needs to be? The end to these failed economic schemes and political machines that weaken and divide, leaving only the elite satisfied. No, we have to be better than this. And if not for ourselves, we must for our kin, our children and their children and the ones after them. Thankfully, our youth has far more motivation to take action and end the years of frustration by breaking down the walls we've created and the inequality that is so outdated. So now, what are you going to do? Let's hope it's something substantially new to keep building post-corona a human existence that is far from over. Learning from our lessons, respecting all persons, especially our healthcare and essential workers, who were invisible to many of us before this pandemic. And never again, lest we forget what and who really matters, even when all hope scatters, because this tragedy surely must be our big opportunity to look beyond what has always been and build a world that we can all thrive in. Thank you so much for listening.
Wow, very powerful, Kumi. Thank you very much. What a message, this idea of doing something substantially new. You can hear those echoes of the pandemic as a portal, echoes of healing the future, and you can sense Kumi's long-term vision for our planet and its people. Should note that just like Paul Hawken earlier, Kumi is also a recent guest on the GIIN's Next Normal podcast. Kumi's episode, entitled The Most Consequential Decade in Humanity's History, was released just back in August. And for today's final session, we are excited to introduce you to two innovators who are putting regenerative principles into practice in the real world in ways that touch the land, our communities, and in fact, all of our lives. I promise you will find their stories both memorable and informative for your own work. This panel, Regeneration Through Innovation, Stories from the Field, explores firsthand accounts from changemakers who are working towards big impact through new ways of understanding this theme. So for the final time today, here is the GIIN's CEO, Amit Bouri. Amit.
Thank you. Today's perspectives on a regenerative next normal have been eye-opening and informative. Now we're delighted to introduce you to two innovators who are building toward a regenerative future in the here and now. Kat Taylor is many things, including a leading impact investor focused on restoring social justice and environmental well-being to build a more equitable and inclusive world. Kat is the founder of Tomcat Ranch Educational Foundation, which is working to build regenerative food systems. And she's also the chairperson of the Triple Bottom Line Beneficial State Bank. Also joining us is Anasa Troutman, a visionary leader and creative whose work has been supported by Kat. Among her many roles, Anasa is the founder and CEO of The Big We, a media company, foundation, and investment fund that is, quote, revolutionizing how inspiration becomes transformation. Kat and Anasa, welcome to the Next Normal Now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Oh, I'm
Yep.
thrilled to have you here. And Kat, I want to begin with your part of the story. I mean, your passion for sustainability and social justice touches many of the themes of interest to our Next Normal Now community. But today we're especially interested in the ways that regenerative principles inform your work. Tomcat Ranch Foundation is a focus on regenerative agriculture that, quote, restores and nurtures communities, as well as the lands and natural cycles on which we all depend. Can you tell us about the ranch and what has it taught you about the idea of regeneration?
Sure. So we take as the principles of regenerative agriculture the following. Always understand your context, think holistically and in terms of systems change, keep the ground covered for healthy soils using cover crops, eschew off-farm and off-ranch inputs, especially chemical inputs and extractive debt, encourage biodiversity above and below the ground, and reintegrate livestock into other production regimes. And if you think about those principles, they can apply to an economy, a financial system, many other things in the name of mutualism, restorative economics, and reciprocity. So the work of Tomcat Ranch Educational Foundation is to de-risk and broadcast both the principles and the practice, and now to encourage adoption and scaling. And it's so important for the many co-benefits, which is also a hallmark of a regenerative system. It doesn't maximize one outcome, it produces many that are synergistic and interactive. And just to name the few that I can remember off the top of my head, those in regenerative ranching are resequestering carbon to address climate change, restoring the quality and quantity of water retained in the soils, encouraging biodiversity above and below the ground, restoring rural economic resiliency, producing a truly healthy food product for humans, restoring racial, gender, and environmental justice in the food system, achieving animal welfare, and many other things. And we, at this point in history, should be seeking all of those co-benefits.
Well, I really appreciate how you talk not only about just what we think about as core to agriculture in terms of the production of food in this case, but also how these principles, connect to a much broader view of social and environmental considerations and issues. And I think that really underscores what we are seeing now, that regenerative principles can guide investments beyond just agriculture. And increasingly, we're seeing people explore how these principles can help build toward a regenerative society as well. Now, the idea, this idea explains your connection to Anasa and to a commitment called the Good Life Pledge. And I wanted to ask two questions on that. First, can you describe what the Good Life Pledge is? And also, can you speak to how you see regenerative principles shaping the broader spheres of investing?
Sure. So I need to start with an arc of activity, sequential strategies that my partner and I pursued over the last literally 4 decades, dating myself, starting with the fact that those of us educated in the United States have to be on a journey of re-education, because the origins of our country are deeply problematic for all people participating in a good life. And we know those origins are, among others, slavery, enslavement of African Americans, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, the land theft and genocide of indigenous people, the persecution of refugees and immigrants, less than personhood for women and non-standard gender identifying folks, and extreme environmental desperation. So our journey started in philanthropy, a little bit of a false target, because philanthropy to me has come to be almost an admission of failure. If we were running society right and had a good civilization for all people, we wouldn't need so much philanthropy. But nonetheless, that's where we started, addressing essentially the symptoms of troubled systems. But we learned that that wasn't enough, and we needed to take a systemic approach to systems change by understanding the insights of actual actors. So we focused on 3 areas, which we called good food, good money, good energy. We started the ranch and the Ranch Foundation at the heart of good food. We've started Beneficial State Bank at the heart of good money, but also 2 venture funds, Bright Path Capital Partners and Radical Impact Partners. And then at the center of the good climate, good environment work, we recognized that was a political problem more than a business or scientific problem. And so my partner, Tom, launched a lot of policy and legislative work, voter mobilization, and ultimately running for president. We did gain a lot of insights about what it takes to change these big systems, but it wasn't enough yet. So we started leaning on rulemaking even more heavily to write the rules of the game, thinking about economic reform in our economy that's very extractive to shift it towards a restorative economy, and looking with Anasa's help at the role that cultural strategy and narrative shift needs to play. So we resurrected a company called Tomcat Media to engage in that work. All of this in partnership with others. And one of those partnerships led to a webinar series called the Equitable Community Economic Development Series. And we became engaged in community with community-led development efforts stewarded by community activists and with full community engagement and a community visioning process. And we learned a lot about how important it is to turn to the communities hurt the first and worst by all of those problems, because they have the insights of what the solution stacks that are effective are. We also recognize that while they needed grant funding, current income to mitigate for harm and suffering, and to prepare their ability to absorb capital, they also needed capital in the form of assets, net worth, equity. And that we will not overcome the disinvestment and theft of wealth, land, and opportunity from Black and Brown communities in this country unless we shift assets. So the Good Life Pledge is a commitment to shift 1/3 of the assets under our control into community ownership and control during our lifetime. And that can look like shifting financial assets at like endowments. It can be in the form of shifting land, like cooperatives and land trusts. I mean, we're looking at that deeply at Tomcat Ranch. And it can be also the use of philanthropic assets as collateral for low-cost financing, and to give the community a philanthropic asset to work with at the end of a hold period. So we started with 5 communities and 2 mentor communities. Anasa's is one of them. And we dedicated a $100,000 grant for capital absorption capacity building and $1 million of donor advised fund assets to collateralize nonprofit bond financings in the future. We also are recruiting other donors. Our aim is to amass $500,000 of current income for the communities and $5 million of philanthropic assets for their use. And people can join supporting the 5 communities and the 2 mentor communities, or they can bring their own community, because this is work going on all over the country, community-led economic development.
And thank you so much for sharing that. And I do appreciate kind of the historical context of this. As you started when you talk about the ranch, how context is so critical. But also looking at, a big part of regeneration, of course, is about restoration. One way I heard it described once is around, in a recent discussion, was around like healing the future. And I kind of hear those kind of principles being applied and how you're approaching this. Anasa, this brings us to you and to your part of the story. Your work is incredibly creative and inspiring, and I see the principles of regeneration showing up throughout it. One centerpiece of your work is leading the Big We, which Kat has supported, as she just mentioned. And can you tell us about the organization's mission and how you see it connecting to these regenerative principles?
Oh, absolutely. For me, the Big We is more than an organization. It's really an ecosystem of organizations, and it's designed to work at the level of culture to bring together communities of folks who believe, like Kat is saying, that we all deserve a good life. I started my career really as a producer. So I'm a producer and storyteller by trade. And what I learned through my work is that we have to go beyond kind of the ideas of policy and practice and really have a bigger conversation about actually who we are at our core, which is dictated by our culture and our core values. And so the Big We really is built to engage in culture at that level. And so we really do the engagement of storytelling and community and practice to really think beyond what the moment is and to think like, how are we actually evolving who we're becoming, so that the things that we do, the policies, the practices, the way we engage in the economy is an outgrowth of us becoming folks who believe that everybody deserves to have a chance, believe that everybody deserves to have access, believe that everybody deserves to be joyful and healthy and sustainable and safe and have love and abundance. And so we have a production company, we have an online community platform, we have a foundation, and we have an investment fund, all working in concert together for that mission.
Well, I really appreciate the holistic approach that you're taking. You know, I find oftentimes that, you know, particularly with the community of investors that we tend to spend our time with at the GIIN, you know, there is, you know, a natural inclination towards like technical solutions. You know, how do we find the right models? How do we scale them up? But of course, if we're thinking about, you know, shifting systems, we need to shift paradigms. And I believe that, you know, this work on that you're, you know, so, you know, focused on in complement to the capital work that you do around shifting narratives and culture is so critical as part of the, you know, a holistic approach to addressing these, you know, shifts. And, you know, in these sessions, we always try to, you know, follow the story all the way through to the real world impact. I'm sure you have many compelling stories about the real world impacts of, you know, the work, you know, done by the Big We. Can you share anything that particularly stands out? Are there any stories about people who benefited from your work that you just can't forget?
Yeah, I think that the work that we're doing right now in Memphis is what stands out to me the most. We happened upon the work in Memphis. I really came to Memphis as a producer working on a musical about MLK and his time in Memphis for the commemoration of his 50th anniversary of his assassination. And happened upon this body of work in this building called Historic Claiborne Temple, which is a historic sacred Black space that was a sanitation worker strike of 68 headquarters, and was sitting in the middle of a neighborhood that was once a thriving middle class, full of art, entrepreneurs, community, and now is sitting in the middle of Memphis, which is 65% Black with a 40% poverty rate. Half the kids are born into poverty. And it's just a juxtaposition of thinking about in the height of the civil rights movement, in the height of entrepreneurship and culture and story, all the way to where it is now, and thinking about this conversation about restoration, thinking about this building that was being restored and what it could mean for it, not just to restore itself as a building, but what the restoration of the building could mean for the restoration of this community, and how we could have a more holistic conversation about it. And thinking about the model that we built at the Big We, thinking about content, the storytelling, community, who are we talking to and what are we talking to them about, and capital, and how are we moving money and resources to be able to do this work of restoration. And now fast forward, I guess it's been 4 years since we've been working in Memphis, and not only are we in the middle of construction on this building, bringing it back to life and bringing communities back into the space, but we also have leveraged that work to be able to build a community leadership council. So we have literally a group of 20 community members who are doing a year-long study on restorative economics, talking about building cooperatively owned businesses, doing local urban farming. And we've already been able to support lots of organizations in Memphis. So we've now helped 2 cultural organizations purchase property and do developments in their neighborhoods. My favorite one is this building that's called the Orange Mound Towers, which is the largest building in the oldest African-American community in all of America, all led by creatives, Black creatives, young people under 30 years old, doing a cooperatively owned economic development model. in addition to being able to move lots of money to folks who are doing work on the ground around technical assistance and supporting community members in this learning. And that to me is the pinnacle of the work that we're doing, the pinnacle of the model, which is really leveraging these beautiful, beautiful stories to engage folks in conversation and moving capital to communities whose stories those belong to, right? Because so often we see the folks telling stories of these communities, and the communities never benefit. They don't get to participate in the conversation. They don't get to participate in the capital part of it. And us being able to support these folks in not only being able to own their own stories, but then actually own the economic growth that those stories are actually generating, to me, is the center of the work that we do, and why we are working so hard to be able to build that, not just in Memphis, but in other cities across the South.
Well, I think that is, I mean, those are such powerful stories about, how single buildings can have such a transformative impact on communities. And I really appreciate the way you're thinking about the historical kind of significance of these buildings, but also working with young people to very much, kind of restore their presence for the future, and for these future generations. And I think it's incredibly inspiring. And I want to just take a moment as we start to approach the close of this great session to talk a little bit about that future. And if you said the work that you're trying to do and the paradigm shift you're trying to drive, if it was successful, and we were in that new paradigm or that next normal, as we've been calling it, what would it look and feel like, if our society embedded the concepts that are underpinning your work? What are you ultimately pushing towards?
First, I want to just thank you for saying what you just said, because what we always talk about is leveraging the story of the past to create the story of the future. And it's so important that we are being clear about our history, but also knowing that the history is not just there to be a relic, that we are actually every day and every moment co-creating what the future is going to be together. And for me, at the risk of sounding super corny, which I probably do all the time anyway, is that is the future of love. Like, my number one question is, what would it look like for us to have an economy, a government, a healthcare system, a public safety system that actually acted out love? What would that look like? And I encourage people to look past kind of like the trite, like, oh, love, but love is a very complex, adult, sophisticated set of ways of being, right? It's not just about like your mom or your partner, but it's also about accountability. It's about equity. It's about what it looks like for us to take all of our resources and to care for each other. It is okay for us to think about an economy that actually cares for people. We must do that right now, because that to me is what the future is. All the work that we do is about us learning how to love each other through policy, through practice, through community, through engagement, through storytelling. Because that's what we all deserve. It's our natural state to be and to share love. And we need to learn how to embody that in literally everything that we do. It's not corny, it's life. It's just what it is. It's what we are all working for, and what we all deserve.
Well, I don't know, some may find it corny, but it sounds pretty compelling to me. And I think it certainly underscores these themes of of interdependence and interconnectedness
100%.
that we all experience. But I like the idea of kind of constructing our economy and society around those principles, and helping to make sure that the economy reinforces those values in our society, not detracts from them. Kat, over to you. You spent much of your career investing for restoration and for regeneration. Your work with Anasa clearly demonstrates that impact, and the type of thinking that you're doing. But how do you think about the regenerative and transformed future that we're driving at, that you're driving at? Can you paint the picture of what you think success would look like for our collective efforts?
Sure. Well, this is just one version, the version I hold. And it echoes a lot of the themes and dynamics that Anasa just identified, and you can't beat love for sure. But I think unfettered capitalism has brought us to the brink of disaster in the form of deep racial and social inequity and planetary collapse. And it did that because we allowed it to be brutally competitive, and maximize instead of optimize, and become owned by too few. When everybody owns a little bit of everything, we thrive. When anybody owns too much of anything, we suffer. So it's time for a new ism. And the ism I prefer is mutualism. you'll hear that term bandied about now. I think the way I would describe mutualism is recognizing that what we need in our economy and the way we organize ourselves in society is a commitment to sacred values that are collectively held, a commitment to just transition, to collective stewardship and ownership and benefit, and a future of self-determination for all. And that's within our reach. It doesn't have to seem so far away. Capitalism in the extractive form didn't happen by accident. It was concertedly put together for profiteering. And if we decide collectively that we want a caring, sharing kind of economy, we can achieve it. And I'll just leave with one story. Sorry, parts of it are a little R-rated, but I've been thinking about the species imperative to get your DNA into the next generation, and what a different strategy there is if your vehicle is sperm or your vehicle is egg. In the case of sperm, and this is what I would equate with extractive capitalism. And by the way, plenty of men behave with egg values and plenty of women behave with sperm values, but just saying, if you have sperm, your model is one against the all. You put as many sperm out there, you compete for resources and hoard them. You encourage competition between your offspring so that the strongest gets the most resource. And that's your strategy. It's kind of a might makes right. If you have an egg, you only have one, maybe two. And you need a lot to help that egg grow to fruition and have the possibility of reproducing themselves. So that means you need communication, cooperation, coordination, collaboration. And it's really more a strategy of the many for the all. And I think that's one of the drivers of mutualism that we can latch on to now to see a beloved community for all people.
Well, as we bring this to a close, I think there's a couple of themes. There's a lot of things I'd love to lift up from this conversation. I'm so grateful for the perspective that you've offered to me and to our community. But one of the things I'm really struck by that I hear from each of you is this connection to like an honest reckoning with our history. And a real clear-eyed look at where we come from, both the damage that's been done, but also the greatness that's been lost, and the work that we do in the presence to restore that greatness and the power that that can have to propel us to a much better future. And I think that continuity of time, that through line of our history to our future is incredibly powerful, but also in a way that is really restorative, not just to, from an economic standpoint or an environmental standpoint or a social standpoint, but really looking at how these all connect to one another and our fundamental kind of interdependence and interconnectedness. I think your accomplishments together and as individuals are, absolutely demonstrate how glimmers of our next normal are already showing up in the here and now. And Anasa and Kat, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Kat, Anasa, and Amit, thank you so much for that. What powerful stories those two innovators have. The chat was lighting up during that. Their messages of being motivated by a future of love, by a sense of mutualism, certainly feels like an inspiring note on which to conclude our session today. If you are like me, you were inspired by all of these conversations that have been highlighting glimmers of a regenerative next normal that are happening in the here and now. For those of you who are newer to this conversation, we hope that you've learned something and perhaps caught visions of what our transformed potential could look like. And for the many experts in our audience, thank you. We are so grateful to have you with us today, sharing your commitment to this urgent work. To our GIIN members who have joined us, we are very eager to stay well connected with you during the concluding months of this calendar year, working to support, connect, and add value to your important work. Also, we are already looking forward to welcoming you next year to the largest global in-person event in the impact investing industry, the GIIN Investor Forum. That is being held on the 12th and 13th of October 2022 at The Hague in the Netherlands. So we are excited about that. For our audience members who are not yet GIIN members, Our member engagement team is certainly eager to hear from you. You'll find much more information on our website at thegiin.org, and you can click on the membership link that you'll find in the very upper right-hand corner of that homepage. In the meantime, to every single one of our delegates, we hope that you will stay in touch with us. Thank you to everyone who participated in our Pass It On chats on social media. Please note, if you didn't get the chance to take part in that social media discussion during our event itself, you're free to respond either later today or even later this week using that hashtag #NextNormalNow to keep the regeneration conversation going, even outside these virtual walls. So please do be certain to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn for our newest research and tools, and also sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already done that by clicking on the newsletter button that you'll find at the very bottom of our homepage. Lastly, we want to take a final moment to again recognize the leading organizations who have made this event possible through their sponsorships. Thank you to Chemonics, Jonathan Rose Companies, KPMG, Responsibility, Treehouse Investments, Wellington Management, and Impact Alpha. So this concludes our third Next Normal Now convening of 2021. We are so grateful that you've joined us. Thank you again, and stay safe, everyone.